Welcome everybody to the next episode, if you will, in the Shaping the Post-Pandemic webinar series. The title of today's discussion is how global brands are responding to the pandemic. And in particular, we're looking at one global Indian brand, indeed, what has recently been identified as the strongest Indian brand, the Indian Hotels Company Limited, IHCL. So we're going to look at their experience in terms of coping with the pandemic. Agenda standard format, we're going to do introductions very quickly, a panel discussion with the audience, and I want to leave as much time as possible for audience Q&A. Both Puneet and Ashley, our featured speakers, are very quick on their feet, and I think you'll get a lot of insight from interacting with them directly, and we will end with some closing remarks by both of them. Our featured speakers today are Puneet Chhatwa, Managing Director, CEO of Indian Hotels, and Ashley Konson. We also have with us a special guest today, Mr. Ron Basu, who, along with Imran Panju, are co-founders of a company called Quest Partners. Now, Quest Partners and Schulich have had a very special relationship going back to 2005. And indeed, Schulich's presence in India owes largely to the work that they have done over this period of time in terms of kind of initiating, if you will, our presence in India and solidifying our presence in India. So the school has been greatly appreciative of their efforts over this period of time. And I'm delighted that Mr. Basu is able to join us today, and our special fond wishes to his co-founder, Mr. Panju as well. So, we will talk with Mr. Basu briefly over the course of the webinar, so stay tuned for that. Okay, I want to now introduce very quickly both of our speakers, and I'm not going to take too much time. I'm just going to give you highlights about each of them. So I'll start first with Ashley. Here are some things that I'd like the audience to remember about him as we go into the conversation. He's worked with a number of different brands across a number of different countries. So a seasoned executive, right? But there are lots of seasoned executives. What distinguishes Ashley is that in addition to being a seasoned executive, he's a seasoned academic, right? You can see the list of programs in schools and countries in which he has taught. But there's one thing that I haven't mentioned there that I will, which kind of tells you the quality of the individual as an academic. Ashley, at the Schulich School of Business, we've got something called the Schulich Teaching Excellence Award. Ashley has won that award 2 times, and Ashley has been nominated for that award a record 9 times. So this is a person who is excellent in the true sense of the word. And I imagine a lot of you who are on the call here are individuals who have experienced the magic that is Ashley in the classroom. He really, we've always had brand management as a course in the curriculum, but what he's been able to do with it and how central he's made it to the curriculum has been magic to see. So thank you, Ashley, for the work that you have done, and I look forward to talking with you. Ashley's passion is identified there, but it's Ashley's values that really have struck a chord with me. And these aren't words. I mean, I speak from personal experience, knowing him over 20 years now. The one value that I will highlight is Ashley's belief in the power of diversity. Truly, I've seen this exemplified. For those of you who don't follow him on LinkedIn, I encourage you to. You will see in there how much he values and celebrates diversity, really believes that diversity leads to creativity if properly managed. It's a value on which Canada as a country is founded, and Ashley exemplifies that beautifully. Delighted to have you on board today.
Thank you.
Puneet, who I don't know as well, but what a list of accomplishments. Let me just highlight a couple. So he's got an MBA from our partner school in France, ESSEC, which is absolutely fantastic. He's a graduate of Delhi University. For the non-Indians in the crowd, what that means is that his grade 12 average was like slightly below 100%, right? That's about what it takes right now to get admitted into Delhi University. So an extraordinary academic record. He's ESSEC and then has done advanced degrees at AMP. Corporate leadership, again, you can see he's worked with German chains, Swedish chains, 3 decades in very senior global roles in hospitality. He's got some very interesting goals and ambitions for the Indian Hotels Company Limited that he's going to talk about today, so I won't dwell on those right now. I do want to identify the honors that he has attained over the course of his career. So I encourage you to Google this thing called the Carlson Fellowship. So the Carlson group of hotels, there's about 15,000 employees, and every year they honor the top 9, right? He's a Carlson Fellow. So it tells you something about the impact that he's had on groups. He's also been identified as among Europe's 20 extraordinary minds in sales, marketing, and technology. So certainly someone that we would like to hear from. And has been inducted into the Hall of Fame, indeed the first alumni to have had that honor by his alma mater, the ESSEC School of Management in France. So wonderful to have you on board, Puneet. Thank you very much for joining us. Okay, so what we're going to do today, just so the audience knows the expectations, we're going to have opening remarks by Puneet. And in the opening remarks, I've asked him to tell us a bit about the group and tell us about what the group has done in the last 3 months, I suppose now, around COVID-19. So we're going to hear from Puneet about that. I'm then going to turn the floor over to Ashley, who's going to compare the IHCL experience with that of other global brands in the pandemic and how they've coped with the pandemic. And we'll hopefully draw some global lessons around branding based on Ashley's comments. I will then turn the floor over back to to Puneet, and the idea in this second go around is to get Puneet's thoughts about where to from here, right? Is the business model going to evolve in any fundamental sense? Questions of this nature we will engage with. And then we'll close with Ashley talking about very generally, in general terms, overall terms about what global brands need to do to adapt in the post-pandemic world. And then we will move over to question and answer. So we've got a lot of content, we've got a limited time, but we will make sure that, that we cover all these because these are interesting, important, and exciting. I thank all of you in the audience for having taken the time to be here, and I look forward to a very, very stimulating session. With that, I turn the floor over to Puneet for his opening remarks. Thanks, Puneet.
Thank you, Ashwin, for overly generous introduction, as I may say so. We sometimes tend to forget our age. So when I went to the Delhi University and I started my hotel school at the same time, this was the year 1981. And to get 60s out of 100 was enough to get into the hotel school, and to get into a good college, 70s was good. And my academic record till the age of 18 was as good as 0. And I was more popularly known as what you would call in French, the enfant terrible. So I just thought I would say it like that. But maybe things changed later. I think some people called me a late starter. So I started late and did, kind of get on terms with the academic part of life also. Anyway, so the subject today is Indian hotels. And why Indian hotels? What is it in this name? Our founder of the Tata Group, Jamshedji Tata, who founded the group almost 151 years ago, was once denied entry into a hotel in Mumbai. And that's when India was still a colony of the British. And the answer he was given, that's what the story goes like, is dogs and Indians not allowed. So he named the company Indian Hotels, and the first property that opened in the Indian Hotels company portfolio was the Taj. the legendary Taj Hotel, Mahal and Palace in Mumbai, rated for the last 2 years by Trust You as the best hotel in the world, based on the customer feedback. And for a lot of people, they use a lot of terms for popularly the Taj Group, and that's they call it the innkeeper of the Indian hospitality. They say when you serve the Taj, you serve the nation. I mean, there is a um, lot of affection. There's a lot of emotional connect. There is a lot of business connect and a lot of history with this group because the first hotel opened almost 116 years ago, and over the last 100 years, the company grew to 200 plus hotels globally, and is one of the rare brands out of, I would say, out of the Indian subcontinent that has made it globally. So the Taj is in New York on the Fifth Avenue, overlooking the Central Park. It's also behind the Buckingham Gate, at the the property called the Buckingham Gate Residences in the St James Court in London. It's even in Cape Town and Dubai and Maldives, and very nice both resort and business locations, not only within India but across the world. And the business is not just limited to hotels. We are also the largest in the flight kitchen business. We have a joint venture with SATS from Singapore, which run the Singapore airport. So that's called the Taj SATS. We are also into some form of shops business. We are into lots of food and beverage brands. And essentially, that's very synonymous with companies out of emerging markets, because all these businesses tend to support your mainstream brand. And our mainstream brand for almost 100, 110, 112 years has been the Taj. And I'll come to that a bit later on what happened in the last 15, 20 years and how the strategies emerged. But basically, the company today is approximately $1 billion plus in revenue system-wide. It has 200 plus hotels, 32,000 plus employees, and as I said, it is present in different businesses related not just to hotel business, but to entire world of hospitality. It belongs to the Tata Group because that's the single largest promoter, but it's a listed company. We are a publicly listed company, and we have around of those 200 properties. We have 158 hotels in operation, with another 42 to 45 hotels in the pipeline. So the growth is expected to be very strong going forward, because the signings are converting very rapidly into openings as we became a multi-brand company. So with that, I come to the, let's say, the recent 20-year history of the group. In the recent 20 years, and as Ashwin mentioned, the latest being that Taj was judged the best, or I would call it the strongest brand by the Brand Finance across all sectors in India. So it doesn't matter whether it's a banking sector or it's consumer goods sector or it's other manufacturing sectors. Taj was rated as the strongest brand, and Tata's as the most valued Indian brand. They retained the title, whereas we are the first time entrant in this club. So in the last 20 years, the group came up with some other brands, one of them being Vivanta in upper upscale, Gateway in mid-scale, Ginger in the budget sector. And then we were beginning to do very well. We started acquiring hotels in New York, and then we went to Cape Town, even all the way to Sydney, and a lot of these, and San Francisco, of course. And then came the global financial crisis. And if the global financial crisis was not bad enough, then came the terrorist attack of 26/11 in Mumbai on our famous Taj, which really hurt the company very, very, very badly. So it took us maybe several years to recover from that. So the 2008 aftermath of the global financial crisis, coupled with the terror attacks in November of 11, you know, very, very bad news that was not just for the sector, but for the country and its people. And we then went on to kind of struggle with the financials for almost 10 years. And way back in 2017, almost 2.5 years ago, a little over 2.5 years ago, we started working on a strategy which we called Aspiration 2022. And the whole objective was to come back to profitability. The objective was to increase the margins by 800 basis points, which was essentially a 50% increase in EBITDA margins, to grow the portfolio by another 50%, have a healthy balance sheet, have a very good debt to equity and debt to EBITDA ratio. And then what came, what I would call, let's say for the purposes of this discussion, as a pre-COVID, we had 9 quarters of consistent margin expansion. We had a growth which was unprecedented in terms of adding hotels to our pipelines or opening hotels. We opened a hotel a month consistently for the last 12 months. You know, the last financial year for us finished on 31st of March. So we opened 13 hotels last year. We added 50 hotels in total in the last 2 years to our portfolio. So it took us to get to, let's say 140, it took us 113 years to get to 140, and it took us only 2-3 years to get to 200 plus. So I think the going was very good. And on 31st of March, despite the COVID impact in commencing mid of February and a very, very disastrous March, followed by a very difficult April, we still ended up posting our best ever financial results in the history of the company. And we came very close to achieving all the goals we had set out on the 5-year journey of Aspiration 2022. We achieved 70 or 80% of it. And then came the COVID and the impact of COVID and almost the shutdown of the entire global hospitality, tourism, and aviation business. So all that we read about 250 billion plus in revenue gone in the aviation sector, 75 million jobs in risk overall around the globe, 75 million to 100 million in the tourism sector, $2.1 trillion wiped out in terms of loss in revenue, is all correct and all had an equally important impact. When I look at India, we are, you know, maybe going to lose a lot of jobs, because the tourism sector is very important in creating direct jobs as well as indirect jobs. So every job created in this sector also creates another 6 to 8, and in some economies up to 10 to 12 jobs in other sectors. So I think this is a very seriously hurt sector, and we call this phase as being, you know, like kind of a DC during COVID. We are not yet post-COVID. And we tend to think that our strategies going forward need to evolve around what will happen post-COVID and what will happen post-vaccine, if there would ever be a vaccine. So, and all the companies have announced something what they call a new normal, you know, kind of a reassurance, and we care. And we thought, you know, we have built our entire legacy around the Taj brand. We are known for a unique service program called the Tajness, which is just not a service program. It's for us, our culture, it's our way of life. And Taj itself has stood for the core values, which we redefined 3 years ago, the 3 letters standing for trust, awareness, and joy. And the trust cannot come if you are not, you know, a secure place to do business, if you're not a safe place to stay. So we had to kind of reinforce and re-strengthen our commitment to Tajness. And having said that, I think we also realize this is not the time to keep talking about Aspiration 2022. I think the times require a kind of a reset. Now you have to reset the way we do business, the reset all the goals that you have, because neither ESSEC taught me, and I don't think till COVID, Schulich would have taught the students what do you do if your revenue becomes zero, if your hotels are shut down, and you still have all the costs in place, because we all learned to do sensitivity analysis based on minus 10, 20, 30, but not minus 100% in revenue. So we came up with a strategy which is now going to guide us for the period of during COVID and post-COVID, which we call Reset 2020. We just announced it with our results, where R stands for revenue initiatives, E for excellence, S for spend, what we spend and how we can optimize that spend, and then for excellence or efficiency in asset management, and T for being thrift and exercising financial prudence. So a lot of initiatives as we speak are being launched to create alternative sources of revenue. See, for the industry to go back to pre-COVID level is going to take time. And why it is going to take time? Because it's not within our control. There are so many things which are regulated by the governments, by the state governments, by the international borders, that is definitely not in the control of any company. So all we can do is come up with strategies which are sustainable, which are not very short-term driven, but come up with alternative source of revenue. As they always say, don't waste any crisis. I think Churchill said that, or every crisis is an opportunity, because we have now the time to think and, you know, to kind of, as they say, you can adjust the sails. So I think in adjusting the sails, we came up with around 7 revenue initiatives. And if you follow us, you will hear about them commencing, you know, even the second one is being launched tomorrow. And the first one was launched last week, which we call a 4D experience. And the 4D experience is basically you dream, you get into your car and you drive, and then you discover a new destination and delight yourself. However, even that is not as effective today, because what India never experienced is that between the states, the borders were shut. So you can really, if you're in a state, let's say a state of Karnataka, you can drive from Bangalore to Kurg, but you cannot effectively drive from Bangalore to Goa. So it's very unprecedented times. This require a lot of out-of-box thinking and a way to make, you know, a move to not only be a good business player, but what the House of Tatas, the House of Taj, the House of Indian Hotels has been known for, being a good community player. So when Jamshedji Tata formed the company, he gave a kind of a strategic vision, which has guided most of the companies, that the community is not just another stakeholder, is rather the very purpose of the existence of any business. And I think we started working on it. But before I get to that, I think I would like to have one video played, if Vito can help with that, the first video on Tajness, a commitment re-strengthened. Thank you, Vito. Thank you, Vito. So I think this is what we are doing. We are communicating with all our stakeholders to provide a safe environment, to give them a sense of security that when you come and stay with us, you're safe. Moving on, I think it's very important for, especially in crisis, the brands, the stronger brands, the brands which have a connect with the customers, the brands which have stood the test of time, the brands that provide the security, because especially in what COVID has done is it has created an element of fear. And never ever have I seen people so worried about what could happen to them, although the fatality rate is maybe much lower than that if you suffer from malaria or dengue or God knows whatever other diseases that we are all aware of. So I think it's very important to protect our brand. It's very important to come out stronger, because this is the time that your brand is more wanted and more needed than ever before. This is the time for the industry to make sure that people come directly to them and not to third parties, because they want to have that direct conversation with the brand. I don't think the price sensitivity will be as strong in the short to medium term as has been before. And in order to do that, I think every brand, and at least what we are trying to do at IHCL, and especially with our Taj brand, is to stay true to its positioning and purpose. We continue to put, like for the last 100 years, our customers first, and especially on the pillar of trust, transparency, and safety. And also, walk the talk. It's dare to do things differently and keep walking the talk. Try to embrace digital as early and as fast as possible. No communication is over communication. It does not matter. This is the time to communicate more and more, whether you do it through webinar, or you do it through press releases, or you do it through social media, or whatever medium one may use. I think this is the time to engage and connect more with your customers than ever before. Be socially and environmentally responsible, and the most important would be take care of your people. If you take care of your people, they will take care of your customers, and ultimately the customers will take care of your brand. But I think socially and environmentally responsible is something which is a key. And an example comes to my mind, on the 22nd of March or 21st of March, we decided to supply meal boxes to the medical staff in the 6 hospitals in Mumbai. 22nd of March, a curfew or a close down was announced by the Prime Minister, which was followed by the lockdown on the 24th. So we had no clue that a lockdown was coming, and we started doing these meals, and we served more than 2 million meals in the last 10-12 weeks, and are still doing so in the hospitals in Mumbai and select hospitals in Delhi, as well as in the city of Bangalore or Coimbatore. We were the first ones to start hosting the medical staff so that they don't have to commute long distances, and that, if you're spending 16 hours of time at work, and then it takes another 2 hours to go and come back under difficult circumstances as there is a lockdown. So we started hosting them together with the Mumbai Municipal Corporation. And some of these initiatives became so strong and gave us a leadership position, because everybody else was then forced to follow. So the next 20 million, 50 million meals came because the Taj was doing so. The next, 50,000 room nights came because the Taj was doing so. And there was no hidden agenda, or there was no kind of, strategy behind it. It was just felt in the philosophy of the Tatas, the right thing to do at the right time. And we just went ahead and did it. And it got us so much of, I would say, so much of attention, so much of love, so much of affection from the entire nation. And then the Economic Times helped us, actually they took the initiative and helped us make a movie, and that we copied it. And I would like to show that as the second video and stop there, that there are two things which differentiate in a crisis. One is how you take care of your business, at the same time, how you don't neglect the community, and then we get into the panel discussion.
For the past 4 weeks, but my family and colleagues are secure that I have a place to call my own, at least until the pandemic ends. Thank you for caring for frontline soldiers in this war. We really appreciate it, and it helps us to do our duties with even more passion. Thank you.
आम्हाला काय हवं काय नको यात आत्मीयतेने लक्ष घातलं. आम्ही हॉस्पिटलमध्ये कामाला आहोत. आमचा आहार कसा हवा, आम्हाला कोणत्या गोष्टीची गरज आहे, असे जाणीवपूर्वक त्यांनी प्रत्येक गोष्ट आम्हाला दिलेली आहे. आमच्या राहण्यापासून ते खाण्यापर्यंतच्या प्रत्येक गोष्टीमध्ये तालने आम्हाला साथ दिली.
That was lovely. Thank you, Puneet.
Thank you.
You know, particularly how vulnerable the frontline workers have been in the last couple of months. What the group has done is truly commendable. Hats off to you. Thank you. I'm now going to turn the floor over to Ashley to get a sense from Ashley about you know what he's heard and his reactions from a global perspective. Ashley, more than anybody else I know, has thought about brands and branding. So I would love to hear Ashley's thoughts in terms of the IHCL experience itself and how it compares to what some other brands that you've been studying, what they've been doing. Over to you, Ashley.
Okay, thank you, Ashwin, and thank you, Puneet. It was really fantastic to hear what you did before COVID and what your strategy is now. To be honest, I wrote down these words on my notepad: a playbook of excellence, both prior and now. So I actually want to start with pre-COVID, if you don't mind, just briefly. There is one truism in marketing today, which too few companies understand, and that is that you cannot loyalty your way to growth. Loyalty is important. It is hugely important. But loyalty that comes from your culture, from who you are, where you get the loyalty of your customers because of your deeply ingrained values and because of your service to your community for so many years, is the kind of loyalty that every brand would aspire to build if they really were looking for excellence. If we're going to spend money on growing, most of our money should actually go to increasing penetration. And we've learned these lessons from Ehrenberg Bass Institute for Marketing Science, from people like Byron Sharp, Jenny Romanak, who are two key researchers there. And so the fact that you would focus in your initial strategy on improving your profitability, whilst at the same time expanding your physical availability, is simply a bold and appropriate move. Because as we've learned from the Ehrenberg Bass Institute, if you're going to grow, penetration is the key, and it comes from doing two things exceptionally well. The one is building mental availability. More people are aware of your brand, and it comes to mind in more buying options. In your case, it would of course be around the idea of staying with you relative to staying with other hotels. But building mental availability doesn't matter if you don't build physical availability. And so, you know, increasing your hotel number by 50 during just a 2 or 3 year time period was simply outstanding. And I'm sure together with everything that you've done, every part of your astute business management in terms of looking at your costs, refocusing your portfolio, these are all outstanding initiatives. So let me turn to the period now of again, it was, you know, I was very thoughtful in writing down those words. You know, thank you for just, you know, providing us with a playbook of excellence. Because not only pre-COVID, but the journey that you're now on represents another playbook of excellence. As a academic, I obviously read broadly. And there are many very astute minds in the marketing world that have written a great deal about what companies should maybe consider doing. Les Bennett on WARC has made you know, many pronouncements, has provided many thoughts. Mark Ritson, an Australian academic, Tellis. There are many people who have written much about what to do in the during these days. And then in the short term post-COVID, in the longer term post-COVID. And to be honest, I think they should read what you're doing. It's almost as if you are like minds. They are some of the most astute minds I know in the marketing arena. And frankly, your playbook would stand as an example of excellence for them too. So again, you know, the way to think about the world that we are working in today is that different industries, different product markets are facing completely different types of challenges. I mean, it's hard to believe, but you know, some product markets, some industries have actually prospered. We have look no further than online retailers. Look no further than, you know, supermarkets. If anything, the challenge for them has been more on the supply side than it's been on the demand side. And then, of course, we have the industry, an industry like yours, where it just collapses from the supply side because you literally, you know, you can't open your hotels in certain states. And if you can open your hotels, you can only open them to 25% occupancy or 15% occupancy. So your room rate can never be, you know, optimal. And even if you start to earn revenues, they're not the kinds of revenues that you could generate. And then, of course, we're not even dealing with the demand side. And of course, you are part of a complete ecosystem, you know, that is the hospitality and tourism market. And if airlines can't bring people to your destinations, then you are focusing on people who can travel by car. And then you speak about issues like, you know, the closed borders between states. Well, you know, I've been watching with some concern, increasing concern as a Canadian. We have our borders closed in the United States right now. What is happening in the United States with the rapidly increasing numbers? And the fact that not only do we have our borders closed, but of course there's a decision point about up soon, do we keep our borders closed for a longer period of time? But now the European Union is talking about closing its borders to American travelers. So, you know, for somebody who runs a global network of hotels in the same way that you do, you are facing the most incredible problems. One of my favorite writings during this period by Les Bennett, who's a British advertising practitioner. In fact, he and Peter Field are known today. They have the earned title of the godfathers of marketing excellence, marketing effectiveness, marketing communications effectiveness. He talks about this not being a recession. So we can learn, you know, a lot of lessons from past recessions. One is that brands that start to that keep advertising during recessions tend to come out of recessions much more strongly. But during recessions, of course, you still have cash coming into the bank. And he actually suggested in a very recent piece of work of his that we think much more of this as we're at war. This is a wartime situation. It is completely different to any recession that any of us have faced in our lifetimes. And so sadly, many industries are facing terrible demand issues that are, as you said, completely out of your control. And then, of course, you know, you amongst, you know, so many other organizations have supply-based issues. Yours, because the question of how many rooms you can open in a hotel, what constitutes safety, might be very different from some, you know, supplier in Canada who can't get goods out of China because manufacturing facilities have been closed. So we really are facing incredibly different circumstances. And of course, as we look forward, the degree to which these are going to continue, and as your sage words showed us, the question of when a vaccine comes out, that's when we can start to think, in very dramatically different ways. So your focus today on what do we need to do immediately? What must we think about in the short term? How might we think in the post-COVID time? God willing, we get a vaccine, is of course exactly what these very influential minds in marketing are suggesting, and highly appropriate. The one theme that I have seen come through regularly, and again, this goes to the richness of your history and the way that as the chief executive officer, you recognize that it is your greatest strength today is this idea of your culture, your purpose. And so much of what's been written has suggested that if you've always been recognized as a good citizen, if you've always been recognized as a beacon amongst your community, that's what you should be right now. Right now, more than ever, you should stand on your values, stand tall, and support your community as best you can, rather than just simply a short-term focus on yourself, even at some risk to the very minute profits that you might be earning now. Because if you have the capacity, and in your case, you are part of a much larger group, your community will reward you richly for your gracefulness, for your humanity thereafter. So without any doubt, I think, the videos explained it beautifully. To be honest, it was for me, I'm grateful. I'm grateful to have heard your words, and I'm grateful to have heard your excellence in terms of your playbook, both prior to COVID and where you're going now in a absolutely horrendous situation. So those are my words, Ashwin, in terms of just some initial feedback.
Powerful, powerful observations. Thank you so much, Ashley. Really appreciate it. And there are various themes that you've identified that we're going to come back to. But before we do that, I just want to bring in one other person into our conversation, and that is our special guest for today, Mr. Basu. And I wanted to turn the floor over to Rontu and ask him, what is it about Mr. Chhatwa and IHCL that motivated you to initiate this webinar? And thank you, first of all, for initiating this and all the other webinars. But what was it about Puneet in particular that drew you? Rontu?
Thank you, Ashwin. Thanks for the question. As you're aware, we've had 3 webinars in May featuring some amazing speakers like Nadir Godrej, Jopi Bhatt, Mrs. Preeta Reddy, Gunit Chadda, Bhaskar Pramanik, Behram Vakil, to name a few. And we straddled different topics from economics, finance, leadership to healthcare. So I thought, you heard Puneet just now, but, with his sort of demonstrated leadership over the last 2.5 odd years, which has, led to, as he mentioned, IHCL delivering on the promise of a profitable growth with their highest EBITDA and profit after tax, combined with his vision, of reimagining the brandscape, which has led to the Taj brand being ranked by Brand Finance as the strongest Indian brand across sectors. I thought, who else would be more ideal and most qualified to speak on this topic on how global brands are responding to the pandemic. And I think he has, over the last 2.5 years, reimagined the brandscape. He has restructured the organization. He has re-engineered performance and strengthened the balance sheet. So, and as you also mentioned, and as the film showed us, the IHCL work with the community over the period of this change and turmoil was also exemplary with the help to the doctors and the quarantine facilities, etc. So in short, the choice was simple. Getting a time from him in his busy schedule was more difficult. So thank you, Puneet, for joining us, and a shout out to Gulshan, if she's listening, for clearing her calendar for this webinar today. Over to you,
Lovely.
Ashwin.
Thanks, Rontu. Thanks. I have additional scripted questions, but I'm getting a lot of feedback from the audience. So if you don't mind, I'm going to open up the floor and ask a couple of questions from the audience, and then we'll get back to the quote-unquote main agenda. First up is from a member of provincial parliament. I'd like to welcome him, Deepak Anand, a Schulich graduate, and in probably the busiest time of his political life right now. So thank you for taking the time, Deepak, for to attend this webinar. So he's a member of the provincial parliament of Ontario, and he's a member of the ruling party. So a lot of work going on right now in terms of managing the pandemic. His question to you, Puneet: how do we build confidence in customers so the hotel business can return to a new normal? And Ashley as well, if both of you can reflect on building customer confidence, your thoughts.
So there are, I think, three things which one has to do. One is, I mentioned actually already, but I'll put a concise definition to it. One is communication. You cannot communicate enough. And one of the OTAs in India took the initiative and came up with a video pulling people across aviation, hospitality, tourism, all the industries in like, you come and you stay with us and you are safe. And we all participated in it happily. As an example, cross company, cross industry initiative. So that's good to kind of support those. At the same time, you have to do it yourself as a group, which we showed as a video, and communicate with all your customers, both via mail, via proper letters, as I said, all mediums of communication. Second, remind them that the kind of stories of strength, I would call it. The staff at Taj, they took the bullets, and that's the Harvard case study, instead of a guest getting the bullet. So they would take this virus also away, they will protect the customer. So I think you have to narrate the story, and this is also a part of communication. The second is following very, very rigidly all the standards set out by WHO, Ministry of Health, state governments, and all that one can do in terms of having the highest level of sanitization and highest level of service delivery, touchless service, or whatever we want to call it. So that's the second part of it. The third is, the new innovative ways of doing business. So if your business is limited in terms of getting, number of people in a banquet room, number of people in a restaurant, maybe this is the time, especially for us, we have lots of spaces. So as an example, you could start trying outdoor catering. Having more spaces outside in the gardens, wherever the weather permits, or we are going to launch as of tomorrow, home delivery of our signature dishes. Within a month, this brand will evolve into having its own app. Within another month, as Ashley was saying, it will become a retail shop. In some of our restaurants, some of our hotels, which have, residential areas around it, and have a lot of footfall. So they could go to these kind of gourmet shops. So I think there is a lot of stuff that needs to happen simultaneously. You can't say, I will first do A, then we'll do B, then we'll move on to C. So if all of this happens simultaneously, I think we'll be able to reimagine ourselves very quickly.
That's great. Thank you, Puneet. Ashley, any comments from your perspective in terms of brands building customer?
Yeah, it really is very easy to build on what you're saying, Puneet. So again, thank you for making this a very easy task for me today. Look, we've learned, again, going back the last 20 years in brand management, we've learned a great deal about the degree to which most consumers make decisions, 95% of the time, unconsciously and emotionally, rather than rationally, as we have been teaching at business schools for so many years. And in fact, Daniel Kahneman and his great book, Thinking Fast and Slow, was of course, one of the pieces of literature that not only did the research help him to win the Nobel Prize Award, but of course really brought that thinking into the public domain, and it really caught my attention as a marketer. I start there because it's an appropriate way to start, because once you know that, then in normal times that building brands through things like penetration, building mental availability, building physical availability, just ensuring that you are a possible choice that consumers might make in staying in a location is very important. And then of course, with your targets, building the distinctiveness of your brand and what you offer in those locations may provide a determining dimension to why they might choose you. So, once we start there, we now have to step back and say, but we're now in the period of time of COVID. And your point that every brand must have a voice. Actually, it's one of my favorite quotes from Jean-Noël Cafferé, a French academic. Going dark today, completely dark, would be about the worst thing that you could do, I believe. But if you spend dollars on communication, you have to be extremely smart, because of course, cash flow is literally the issue, the lifeline of a business. But you have to at least have a voice. And if you're going to bring customers in, you, instead of focusing on more emotive messaging, the idea that you speak to what you know to be consumers' fears, what you are doing as a brand, as an industry, based on a very rational messaging strategy to keep them safe, to do the right things, to go even above and beyond, maybe even some of the rigid standards that are put in. But by speaking to those things, you start to become you maybe get into the consideration set. You maybe become a choice again, and they may choose you versus somebody else in the industry. Now, of course, you've spoken about digital, and I know that this is a huge strength that you bring to your group. Well, one of the findings, of course, coming out of the great work on marketing effectiveness from Les Bennett and Peter Field, is the strength of digital video today. So if you separate brand building from a sales activation or performance marketing, digital video provides a very powerful tool to, of course, connect with consumers in a way that can be highly emotive. The wonderful strength that you have, Puneet, that I think you have surfaced a number of times today, not in a way that is boastful, but in a way that is full of humility because of the incredible history of the business that precedes you, and how it is quite clear that today you not only do you recognize it, but it is part of you also, is the fact that you can use your traditional strength of targetness around your rational messaging. And so you can create, based on your history, your rich history, an emotiveness around your very rational messaging that I just think is incredibly powerful.
You don't know Ashley for as long as I do. Let me simply tell you, this is not a man that's easy to impress. So, and generations of Ashley students will tell you that. So it's actually the first time I've heard him speak in such a laudatory fashion. So it's quite remarkable. Thank you. One other question, and this is close to my heart. Twisha Sharma asks, living in Delhi, the restaurants at Mansingh, Taj, Vark, Machan, House of Ming have been a part of my family's outings since childhood, my adulthood. These restaurants are brands in themselves. Where do you see such dining experiences in the future? Will it still be luxurious and hold the same perception in people's minds? Puneet.
Lovely question, because it's very close to my heart too. I grew up around the corner from Mansingh. So the first thing was when I joined the company, this hotel was put on a live auction. The first thing was to retain the property, because I couldn't imagine hotel business without Mansingh. So of the 30 odd years that I spent living in Europe, every time I came to India on a visit, my school group was meeting at the Machan which is all-day dining at Mansingh. And so I would just make it very short and sweet. Machan is the first all-day dining that was pre-COVID being revamped and being taken back to what it was like 40 years ago, without a buffet, because 40 years ago there were no buffets. And we took that conscious decision, having no clue that a COVID will come and people might think we were so smart and ahead of time. No, we were not. We just wanted to bring back, you know, everybody's Machan, her parents' Machan, which they went to, right? So it would have opened had there not been a COVID, but it will be relaunching in a couple of months' time. And exactly the way it used to be, with the raised platform in the center of the restaurant, and you know, all that stuff done in that kind of decor, in that kind of style, but just tweaking of some of the fonts and some of the things that you need to progress with time, right? You preserve the core, as Ashley keeps saying, you know, this Jim Collins thing, you know, you preserve the core and you stimulate the progress. The second thing is House of Ming. Now, the first House of Ming, which is opening outside of Mansingh, is in London. So very soon, we will have both our club, the Chambers from Mansingh, and in many others in India, the Private Members Club is opening at the St. James and Buckingham Gate properties, as well as the House of Ming, because in that part of the city, there is no, I would call it the Szechuan or / the Indianized Chinese experience. And when people come and live there, especially in those suites for a very long time, and we have this Michelin star restaurant called the Quilon with the South Indian food, I think after a few days, you do need the Chinese experience. So anyone of Indian origin can associate with that very, very closely. So the idea was to create value in these brands. And then that's how we transitioned from a branded house where everything was a little bit Taj or by Taj to start making the house of brands and making some of these iconic brands as a business in themselves, so that we create value in each of these businesses, not only on the P&L of the restaurant, but in the brand name itself. So it's all on the way.
That's great. Ashley, your views on luxury dining and how you see it evolving?
You know, I hesitate to make direct comments after Puneet, but here is again one of the things that maybe will add value to this part of the conversation. So much that some of these authors are saying is that this is the time to think like an entrepreneur again. So even if you are, a listed company, you're running a huge organization in the same way that Puneet is, an international organization. Today, if ever, leaders of large organizations need to bring this idea of entrepreneurial, maybe we can call it intrapreneurial thinking to their organizations. This is the moment. And so again, just some of the ideas about, how Puneet and his team are thinking about the unused spaces that they've got in their hotels, thinking around, creating restaurants that are outside. And I'm sure for the foreseeable future, until there is, a vaccine. By the way, today is the day that, of course, Toronto opens up its outdoor patio. So finally, we are into phase 2 in Toronto. And I will tell you, I've been speaking to a whole bunch of people. This idea of, yay, we're free, is very much balanced by that. But do I really want to go to an outdoor patio if there's more than just a couple of people sitting there? So these are the realities of thinking about restaurants, even luxurious restaurants for the near future. We're lucky, it's summer in Toronto right now, but we do have rain. But of course, climate, so many location-based factors. Are you in winter? Are you in summer? We started being, a lockdown in winter, but fortunately it's now summer. I have family in South Africa. Johannesburg can be freezing cold at night. No one is going to sit outside at a restaurant there. So, you have to be pragmatic. You have to be very specific in terms of thinking about locational differences. And then this whole entrepreneurial mindset is a must.
Yes. Thanks, Ashley. Next question, and we're also running short on time, but it's one that connects to the one that I was posing anyway. It's by Johnson Matthew, and Johnson asks, considering the current crisis, what opportunity do you see for Indian hotels to get ahead of the competition post-COVID? And in particular, he's asking, the initiatives like the home delivery, how copyable are they? So will they actually give you an advantage? Puneet?
Yeah, I think one thing this crisis has taught us is getting ahead in what? I think that has to be defined. Getting ahead in revenue, in businesses, in culture, as Ashley said it, in character, in I think when it comes to being the custodian or of Indian hospitality or the innkeeper of Indian hospitality, we are way ahead of anyone, and people do look up to us. What do we do? And then they follow, right? So I think there is a sense of responsibility. Actually, there is sense of responsibility, but also the burden of that to always get reminded to do the right things. And getting ahead by just number of rooms and just by, I have the most number of rooms or I have the most dots in the spots, in the right places, across the world. I think this is not a strategy for a long term. And I think also, just now Ashley mentioned about how loyalty, going after loyalty, spending into loyalty, not relating loyalty to culture. I kind of also personally resonate with those kind of things. So I think definitely we have to create new revenue streams. In order to have those revenue streams, you have to have the product. So if we say we are going to focus on drivecations, now you need to have all those kind of resorts. So fortunately for us, and for those who don't know it, I mean, the Taj created Goa, it created Kerala, it is in Andamans. So we have that kind of a footprint, both within India or in Maldives or in Sri Lanka or in Bhutan. There are places where you can get to. So you need a balance on supply side, you need a balance on the demand side, then you need to be the entrepreneur or the entrepreneur that Ashley mentioned, and then don't open the book and see what someone else did, but be a bit ahead of the game and do what you think might sell. Nobody has the proof because it has never happened before. As we said, in our lifetime, we have not gone through such a crisis. And you use all your entrepreneurial skills, not your one person's, but the team. And hopefully people come up, with ideas that have never been, experienced before. So in one of those ideas will definitely click, and without risking a lot of capital, you can actually go ahead in the execution mode. And I think the timing is important. I think it's not the large who will beat the small, but it's the fast who will beat the slow. So agility in this kind of crisis, is very important. The people who first started manufacturing masks, people who first started doing the disinfectants, the people who first started, producing the ventilators, I think they were way ahead of the game. And I think we have to do similar things, that not forget in whatever you do, you're doing it with integrity, but also don't forget the agility. So combination of integrity, innovation, and agility should get you, give you the required competitive advantage.
Great. I will put you in touch with one of my colleagues. Her name is Ellen Oster, and she has just written a book called Stragility. And she's marrying core strategy with the importance of agility. So your comments are most timely. We're running short of time. Ashley, I wanted to turn the focus to you in terms of what you've been reading about global brands, and are there best practices that you've identified? Are there examples that you could point to Puneet that Puneet could maybe study and be inspired from? Is there anything in that domain?
Well, it depends if we're talking right now, or if we're talking about best practices in a post-COVID world. I certainly have a list of literature. I'm sure Puneet may have read much of it, but I have a very nice list of just 4 or 5 items that he might find of great interest that I could send him after the session, and I would be very, very happy to do that. What most of the authors are saying today is that you have to recognize that the situation you find yourself in your particular business, in your particular industry, is a very personal one. That there is no, the lessons to be learned by looking across other businesses are few, because not in our lifetimes have we experienced something that is kind of similar to a war where, but it's not a war. It is an incredibly difficult sociological health challenge. And so, I would, again, go back to my earlier comments. I think, when I spoke about a playbook for excellence, I think Puneet's background, his knowledge, the fact that he finds himself today at a brand that has such a rich history of serving the community, they're a bunch of wonderful strengths, and the future is unknown. So I'm going to turn completely to the post-COVID world. I think that if anything is a lesson that businesses have learned, this idea of portfolio management. What we thought of as growth opportunities prior to COVID and what we might be thinking of in post-COVID days are actually quite different. So for instance, Puneet now speaking to, we need to build more drive-to locations. We hear again and again and again from health experts, and I hope that CEOs are hearing this, that we may see another pandemic like this again in our lifetimes. In fact, it is expected with some of the changes in the environment, global warming, that these may be the kinds of things that people live through more than once during their lifetimes. So I think a little bit of thinking about, how does my portfolio need to change, even, within a core business like hospitality, so that it provides some level of protection for cash, I think needs to be considered. So, thinking again like an entrepreneur is going to be very, very important as we come out of this. I teach one class where the title of the class is called Nurturing Organization. Is called Nurturing Organizational Creativity and Innovation as a Core Competency. The reason that class is so important in a brand management course is because of this idea of managing brands over time and the different forces that shape the brand's ability to continue to grow over time. At the core of that lecture is this idea of what really gives you strength is not that you run creativity lessons for your team so that they can be more creativity. It's that you nurture an organizational culture that embraces creativity, that embraces this whole idea of innovativeness and thinking like an entrepreneur. And, I don't know what exactly that aspect of the culture is today, but I would guess that if you have a sense of tartness, you already have a fertile ground for it, because tartness and cultures like that don't just come from providing service people with scripts that they have to set, that they have to be very rigorous about sticking to. It's also about enabling individualism in terms of, what are the moments that you have to walk away from those service scripts to still provide a sense of tartness, given that specific challenge that somebody is facing, and given the hospitality experience that you want to provide. So I believe that these things are going to be really critical. And I would guess that Puneet already has a culture that he can, where it's already fertile ground for what he's trying to do for the future.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ashley. Unfortunately, we're a little bit over time, but the last word to Puneet in terms of where you see the group going from here.
Well, I think we are constantly looking at the next 100 years. We're not looking at 1 year or 2 years. And in order to look at the next 100 years these days, you do have to look at maybe the next 10 years or 20 years. So nothing that we do is very short term. Although short term, we have to protect cash flows and make sure that, that we're doing fine on those kind of parameters. But as I said, Ashley has strengthened our belief even more through this webinar that your organization culture, nurturing an organization culture, nurturing an organizational creativity will eventually be your biggest competitive advantage. Now, whether we call it touchness or we call it thinking out of the box for the new ideas, I think that's what we have, and we should protect what we have and keep building on it and keep reimagining and reinventing.
Yes.
Great. Thank you so much. We look forward to welcoming you when when you're next in Toronto. It would be wonderful to have you come and speak to our students at the Toronto campus, and indeed at the India campus in Hyderabad. Thank you for your support of that campus, and it'd be great to continue this association with you and the brand. So Ashley, Puneet, Rontu, thank you very much, and to the audience as well. I hope this was a thoughtful, reflective experience for you in terms of thinking through the challenges that global brands are facing and what they need to be doing to emerge stronger. In many ways, though, it's reinforced certain fundamental truths around branding and marketing generally. What is your brand's purpose? Stay true to it. Don't chase short-term wins. Don't react in panic to the short term. Find your core, strengthen your core. To me, the thing that has been the most impactful for me is that the Taj, at this moment of crisis, opened its doors to the doctors and nurses, the frontline workers in the war against COVID. Right? It opened its doors to them. It provided them with places to stay. It provided them with food. So they were safe, healthy, and hence way more effective in their fight against the virus than it could have been. It shows the mindset of a management that isn't thinking about cost and profit in the immediate term. It shows a mindset of a management that is thinking about the city of which it is part and the country of which it is part. These are the lessons in terms of global brands and the pandemic that I certainly have taken away. And for this, I'm deeply grateful to all of you. Thank you very much. And with that, we sign off.